This is a video I've been wanting to make for a couple of days. This is a concept for a star generator that uses a black hole at its core to generate a gravitational field that pulls together to sustain a Dyson sphere that at a specific distance has enough gravitational field energy to maintain a star around the Dyson sphere. And so you can create layers of this, and in concept harness the energy at the center and the core of a star. So as a star emits energy, you could harness it in two directions instead of just containing all the energy of a Dyson sphere. So let's say this is your Dyson sphere, and this harnesses outward energy. This design here is supposed to be able to contain and capture internal energy too that could be otherwise wasted in a star, and based around the idea of equal and opposite exchange of energy. I've been working out how to draw this thing to convey it, because it's always in my brain. And we can make micro black holes on Earth, but they don't self-sustain. So obviously this would have to be absolutely massive. And some of those super massive stars, I kind of wondered, maybe this is out there already. Maybe it's in the universe, huh? But anyway, so you'd have your black hole, which we still don't know what happens at the center of a black hole, let alone around the black hole. But I have my own theories on it, and there ain't too many options of what it is, and then you get rid of all the fantasy. And so there's your black hole, and there's your field. This is your entire field of a self-sustaining black hole, or maybe the Dyson sphere itself. Another thing. So I was always thinking, why do I draw Dyson spheres in waves? It's the most efficient way to capture. Anyway, so as a Dyson sphere is pulled inwardly at a specific distance, it can't shrink more. And so it's like an implosive force. If you think about it like the big boy, the atom bomb, how they have that in reverse. So that's designed to come in as a spherical pressure and apply force around all axes. Now this would maintain the structure then, and maybe there's a way to maintain the black hole through doing that, as gravity is generated from this black hole that we can make, that the object around the black hole can emit the sustaining force too. And then then you have your your alpha particles, and you need to generate super plasma around this, which is probably the most difficult part. And this gets into like black matter shells and things, and then fusion and all this other stuff that I've been talking about. And so now you have your forces pulling in, and you're using gravity And so if we have a self-sustaining black hole here, gravitational pull, you can't insulate gravitational fields unless you have what's at the core of a black hole, essentially. Now here's your alpha particles. I don't know how you want to draw those. How's it going on with my throat today? Yeah, that's another thing I've been wondering. Maybe neutrinos are hollow. There's definitely a hollow particle somewhere that we can't find because they're extremely hard to detect because their mass is near zero. But the more smaller the shell, and the more vacuum that's inside of it. More perfect vacuum means less mass. So you got your alpha particles, and in here you would want your superplasma. Whatever it is as a wave function or similar to what they're doing at ITER with those cyclic, what do they call them? Cyclic plasma field generators, which I wouldn't call it cyclic. I use that as a different meaning, so I don't know if I'm using the right word. But anyway, with superplasma, have I mentioned superplasma in another video? Superplasma is a theoretical state I came up with to explain what happens at the core of stars to increase the probability of particle formation and interference functions between two states of matter, between plasma and a nuclear state of matter, of alpha particles and beta particles. And I'm not a nuclear physicist, but what it does is superplasma increases the probability of, say, an alpha particle gaining a charge. It's so dense, it's all electrons, it's like a supercritical fluid, so in a way, carries an electromass, static field mass, I don't, and it's a superconductive state of matter. And it has two superstate properties. So this field would interact with that, and eventually then you get, an atom. Well, I think actually they don't have, right? There's two on the first band. But to me, that's your electron atmosphere here. And that's where your field charge is. And so eventually these build, they bring in more and more matter, they form helium, and fusion, and then a star builds. And eventually you get that field emitted. I've always wondered if there is a way to sustain a black hole with its field emitting structure, that if we can build this outwardly, we can start from a very small scale, say one null particle, and build up from every null particle to create these star generators. And then that goes into structuralizing, or the universe thing. This is why I call this a god tier technology. And that we could fabricate like a sort of hologram that, I mean, we can manipulate time and everything, existence. And anyway, back to this is, the point of this is to create a self-sustaining star. A star that won't grow too big and won't shrink and won't die out. All about a biometrically sustained solar system. So then, you know, you got your other Dyson sphere, your real Dyson sphere, which I always thought was a cool idea. And they got like what, partial Dyson spheres that aren't completely sealed and stuff. There's lots of theories, but at a certain point, you're creating a shell. And this is one reason why I think if there are other, you know, species and civilizations out in the universe, why we can't detect them is because they don't want to be found. And they would be using this. I mean, it's just like, what is it, Vanta Black, I think? It's made up of carbon nanotubes. Absorbs 99% of light. So, I mean, you would take in what's emitted externally too from the Dyson sphere, because the universe is still full of all these waves of energy that are being emitted from galaxies across time and space throughout the universe. And so eventually you can create something else, which is an external black hole, which fundamentalizes and creates these super massive shells of black matter that as a black hole shell forms around the Dyson sphere. Is emitted partically quantum particles are emitted, pulled in internally to help sustain your black hole. And this whole thing just functions back and forth, particles emitted outwardly and through Hawking radiation, right? Too. However, but this would sustain us for trillions of years, billion trillions. And the calculation is massive. It's something like 25 zeros. Essentially, this is what we're going to do to sustain our star, to maintain our star, to maintenance our star, so that it doesn't get too big, that our solar system can sustain, and that's pretty much it. It's one of the few god tier technologies I've come up with, besides fusion. But really, when you have technology at that level, it all correlates to one another. It's a fundamental technology that can structuralize reality, is what god tier is. To maintain reality so that we don't have to worry about extinction. And this is why we need a good and strong foundation of philosophy. Because this is the powers that we are working with in science. Is the ability to construct things like this, where my theories of time, maybe I'll make another video about real-time travel and how it's plausible. Because it is. It's just you don't want to fuck with it because it resets all the probabilities of choices. It's unpredictable. Say you could live like Groundhog Day in a moment of conflict, and in your mind you have two options, and you almost take that one, but then you second guess yourself. There's a probability that you won't second guess yourself and make a mistake next time. So anyway, back to this. But we would live in, there's like a habitable zone, and these things would be huge. And it said as large as supernovas and supermassive stars. Maybe even larger, I don't know. In theory, if you had all control of all matter in the universe, you can make one singular structure out of this. Live within these different shells, and you'd have perfect safety for one thing. I mean, you can't get through it unless you have a wormhole, which is a whole other theory about how to displace particles, create perfect vacuums between 2 points, and to travel. But it takes so much energy that it would be a perfect weapon too. It would just be an antimatter weapon. And I mean antimatter as in like matter deconstruction. It would destroy anything in between 2 points that is there, or send it out at such a high velocity that you run the risk of a random particle flying across the universe and creating this huge, just supercritical mass explosion. And to overcome the Coulomb field interference, just one little perfect flight pattern right to the center. Right. So, I think that's everything. I don't need to ramble anymore. I need to get back to work on, I'm working on how to predict the unknown particles at CERN. Using my gravitational field model, so, which is correlating back to one of the issues I've been having, is how to figure out exactly how many null particles are in an atom volume, and how that bond energy, the wave, equates to the gravitational field force, and with structured particles after that. From null particle construction, we can predict how subatomic particles forms from subquantum variables of... It's really complicated to figure out. Anyway. But that's my work.